Welcome to the Needle's Eye Faith and Work Show, a show that aims to help Christian professionals grow in Christ, find your purpose, and transform your workplace. I'm Jeremy Woltz with Needle's Eye, and I'm sitting down with working men and women to find out how their faith impacts their work. Today, I'm joined by Meagan Miller, world traveler, gardener, and clinical research coordinator. Meagan, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Well, good. That's good. You also look great. I like your outfit.
Thank you.
Legitimately, the dress that you're wearing just makes me it makes me feel happy.
Oh, I love it.
You know, it's very bright and colorful.
So it's nice out, so I have to
match
go
the
with
weather.
the vibe, you know?
I got it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's nice out because you dress so
Probably.
springy.
I like to think so.
There you go.
Yeah. I didn't, I have a lot of cozy sweaters on rotation right now because I'm trying to really make it be cozy.
Yeah, but it's like
today was
70
not the
degrees
day,
outside.
so. Yeah,
I wore a sweater yesterday and I genuinely thought I was going to pass out. It was so hot.
Yeah, too much. I almost wore a sweater with this and then I was like, you know what? I don't need it.
No, I'm sweating now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
anyways, hey, cheers. Glad you're here.
Hot tea and coffee.
Well, so let's dive in a little bit to who the heck you are.
Yeah.
I know you, right? We just had breakfast yesterday.
We
It
did.
was wonderful.
Probably going to reference it a lot.
I hope so.
Stuff we just talked about.
But I know that people watching or listening or whatever may not have a great idea of who you are, or even what you have to talk about that anybody would care about. So do me a favor. I think you have lots of great things to say, but do me a favor, just briefly introduce yourself. Give me the quickest 2-sentence biography of what you do and what your faith is. And then of course
what your faith is. That's an easy question.
2 sentences, that's easy, yeah.
Got it.
And then the one that I've asked because I just think it's fun, what were you like as a kid? So that's a lot, but just go with it. We'll free associate. We'll just popcorn this thing.
Okay. You might have to remind me of some questions.
That's fine. I ask really big questions all the time.
Yes. Okay, so I'm Meagan.
Meagan Miller.
Miller, yes. I mean, it doesn't matter what my last name is, right?
Social security number, bank account.
Yeah, all the things. And yeah, I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina. And then I have lived in Richmond for 13 or 14 years, a very long time. So I consider myself a native at this point. Yeah. For work, I'm in the clinical research world. I'm a clinical research coordinator currently, but I'm sort of in a job transition.
Clinical research coordinator.
Yes.
Okay.
So that means that I work for people that do research and I make sure everything runs smoothly for them.
Got it. Would that be akin to a project manager? Is it different?
It's very similar. Okay. Yeah, it's just in the clinical research world instead of the corporate / other. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yes, it's similar though. It's the same concept.
Okay.
I make sure everything happens that's supposed to happen.
Right. And you've done that job for 10 years?
Longer. As long as I've been in Richmond. So 13.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So, but yeah, in a job transition. So that will look slightly different in a couple weeks. We'll talk about it. Okay. I'm sure.
Is it a secret? Do we know what your job is going to be?
Oh yeah. Well, so my new title will actually be project manager. So that's how similar things are. But it will be a little bit different role. And it'll be a fully remote job. So.
Wow.
I know.
It's kind of exciting.
It's exciting. So.
Maybe.
We'll see. I mean, I think so. I think it's a good change.
Okay.
But it'll be different from going into the office.
Yeah.
Regularly.
Yeah.
Now.
Your office is your couch.
Yeah. I mean, I need to I need to not spend too much time on the couch. So
yeah,
I try to sit at my dining room table or
that's smart.
Somewhere else. But yes. Okay.
Okay. So you were essentially doing the same job. You're just transitioning to a different place.
Well, it's not quite the same, but similar. Yes.
Okay.
So in my new job, I'll be sort of working. I'm going to be working for UVA, and I'll be there on the team that manages research, but from the other side of it. So right now, I collect data, I enter data, I do all the things for any sort of data that we're collecting. Okay. And then on this new role, very simplistically put, I'll be managing that data from the other side, from the university side. So I'll be coming through and checking things and making sure, kind of auditing, but much more than that, training staff, helping people if they have troubles or issues or need to troubleshoot things.
Yeah.
So it's like taking the skills that I have and like building upon them.
Okay, so this is actually like a little bit of like a stretch for you. Not, I don't mean that like
no, it is like
you're not incompetent, but just it's more than you've had to do.
It's definitely a new role.
Yeah.
I mean, yes. So it will require, I think, a bit of a learning curve.
Okay, so
but hopefully building on things that are already pretty solidly there.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that? Are you more excited or more nervous? Like, because there's got to be some of both.
I mean, some of both. Yeah, I would say though I'm mostly excited because part of with being a research coordinator that like we don't have to get super into, but part of it is that you sort of hit this like ceiling within that where there's not a whole lot of room for growth unless you switch roles slightly.
Yeah.
So a lot of people go into more of like an administrative role, so like grant management or things like that, finances, like on the budget side, or there's other things that people can kind of transition into. But yeah, you kind of hit a ceiling of like, this is as far as I can really go here. So I am excited to like, just learn new things, do something different. I think it will be a good change for me.
So it's partly like a good professional move, but this is also personal development.
Yep.
You actually get to work on new skills and try out new competencies and kind of work on yourself.
Yep. Learn new things.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I think it'll be good.
Okay. So that gives us an idea. You work for UVA. You're a who? A Wahoo?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Not yet. In a few weeks. Yeah.
You will be soon.
Technically, I'm still a VCU Ram, but in like 2 weeks.
From Ram to Wahoo. So then give me like really brief background on like, how would you describe your faith journey in like 2 sentences or less? I know that's not enough time. We've got a lot more time to get there.
Yes.
But just to sort of set the stage where you're at now.
Okay, so I grew up in a Christian family, have always been like in church growing up. You know, we had like family devotions every night, like all of that.
Whenever I hear people say that, I always want to know what that was like. Because to me, like, full disclosure, I'm a parent. I can't imagine sitting, now they're 4 and 2, they're very young. But like, I can't imagine sitting there and be like, okay, kids, open your Bibles. It's time for, like, what is that actually like? And I'm sure a lot of people do it. I don't mean to throw shade. I'm just curious.
We always had little books that we would read from, like, or my parents would read from.
Okay.
So, this is like such a throwback. There was like these monthly devotional things that we get mailed to us every month. And I think they were called Keys for Kids. My sister is like having a conniption right now at that phrase. But,
flashbacks.
I know. But basically it was like, you had like a verse and then you read a little like story that had like an application, right? About like another kid. And then at the end, it was like how to like pray about it or something. It was just like a 1-pager.
Okay.
Took me like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And then we would pray together as a family every night. Which usually was like pretty much the same.
Prayer?
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a really deep family Bible study. It wasn't like, hey, let's all be really vulnerable and share what our heart is. It was
just like,
I don't mean to downplay it, but like it was a little bit of like a rote. We do the same thing. We all kind of know what to expect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's still built in a habit and a discipline.
Yes, definitely. So yeah, and I went to Christian school growing up, so I feel like that really helped provide a solid foundation of like scripture and things like that. And then when I was in college, I feel like faith was just a little harder because I was very busy and I didn't know how to manage my schedule. And so, I mean, I went to church some, but it just wasn't like as much of a priority during that time. Because I just had a lot going on. And then when I moved here right after school, it was very important to me to get plugged into a church because I wanted to, but also because I needed to meet friends. Like I moved here knowing no one. So I needed a way to meet people. And so, yeah, I went to church here in town for like 10 years. It was good, not great always. It's fine.
There's a story there.
There is. You can listen to our other podcast,
we've done
our
this,
old episode about that. But yeah, and then with COVID, I kind of like took a break for like 2 or 3 years. 3 years, I guess. which was good. Like it was what I kind of needed to reset a little bit. But yeah, now I've been back in church for about like 7-8 months.
Okay.
And that has been good.
Good.
So that was more of like my church journey, I guess, than my actual faith journey.
Yeah, but you know,
But
they're
we'll
tied
get
together
there.
in
Yeah.
some ways. All right. Then last question to just set the stage. What were you like as a kid?
I feel like I was always very grown up, which
Okay.
probably
Like you were precocious, you know,
yes.
okay.
Yes. Like I always enjoyed like talking to adults, even as like a very young child.
Okay.
And I'm the oldest of two, but like I'm everything an oldest daughter. Like
You were the text.
I fall into all the stereotypes, yes, of
Got it.
like a little bossy, knows everything, but like actually probably does know everything.
Okay. So still very much.
A little bit.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
a little bit.
Fair enough. Okay.
So yeah, nothing really has changed.
All right. Good to know. Well, perfect. Okay. Well, so some of the things you talked about, and we'll get into this because I think you have a really unique faith journey. I mean, part of it being you were raised in, I mean, pretty much every aspect of your life, you were raised in a Christian setting, right? You went to Christian school. You had a very, very devoted family to their faith. You've been in church the vast majority of your life. And naturally, I think that bleeds over into the way that you approach your work. But what I'm really interested in is you even talked about how you're transitioning to a completely remote job. So, not to only talk about this, because I think you are much more than just your job, but I would be fascinated to see like how have you, in this career you've had, the 13 years you've been where you're currently at, how has your faith seeped out? How has it kind of bled over into the way you do your job or the way you interact with coworkers? Like, what role do you see your faith playing at your work?
So I think part of it, like the first thing that comes to mind is just the relationship piece, right? Like I really care a lot about a lot of my coworkers. I care about like the people that I'm working with on a day-to-day basis. I try really hard to be like supportive and encouraging of them. And also just like really respectful, like that is very important to me.
Right.
Which again, it doesn't necessarily, I don't know, that's not necessarily fate. For me, it is, right?
Sure.
There's certainly people that are just respectful because they're
Right. I was gonna
kind
ask.
humans, right? But yeah, I think for me, it's more the relationship piece that then enables me to have conversations outside of work or like in another setting or even at work, right? Like,
Right.
but I'm not trying to like force a conversation about like, oh, do you go to church? Like, what's your
Right.
deal with God? Like, right, that has to come from a relationship. And I think that's in anything, any setting that we find ourselves.
Yeah.
Not just at work. But yeah, I think that having those personal relationships with people does enable me to then have more of those deeper conversations. And it is funny because I feel like people will open up to me about things that I'm like, we don't even know each other. I don't know why you're telling me this. Like, this has always kind of been my experience. Maybe it's the precociousness coming through. I don't know. But like people, even when I was like first in my job, people would tell me anything and everything.
Right.
And so, I don't know, trying to like encourage people in these like very hard things that they're telling me that I probably have like no business knowing.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, they feel comfortable sharing, which, you know, I think is part of God within me, right? And making them feel comfortable anyway.
Yeah.
So that's a
Okay.
part of it. And I think the other piece is just like showing up to work and working hard and trying to do my best while also having good boundaries. Like that's also really important to me. But yeah, I think on the days that I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this today, right? Like knowing that I'm working in part like for God or I'm a representative of Him, right? Like that changes how I show up in anything.
Right.
So that is work and a lot of other things as well.
Okay. So you hit on something that I always think is crucial. You even said, look, there are a lot of people, they're not even Christians, but they're still really kind people, right? So you talked about like, for you, a lot of it is the relational aspect. It's treating people with dignity and respect. It's letting them be fully themselves, and you're not using it as a chance to condemn them, or you're just letting them be them.
Yeah.
And you're treating them with respect and dignity for the fullness of who they are. How is that different? Or for you, where do you see that as like, this is what God's calling me to do, as opposed to like the non-Christian who does the same thing?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to put you on the spot,
No,
but I always think it's a good point.
Yeah, I think for me, so much of it is just, my intention behind doing that. Because sometimes I even have to catch myself of like, oh, I'm not doing this for what I can get in return.
Yeah.
Right? And not to say that even those other people are doing that either.
Well, and you're just talking about your own motivation.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, but I think, I have to check your heart or whatever, right? Like, am I actually being kind and being thoughtful and being maybe generous or whatever to people, again, anyone that I come in contact with, because I actually am trying to like share Jesus or, be his representative in the world, or am I trying to get something out of this interaction? Whether that's just feeling good about myself because I did something nice for someone, or if that's, I did something nice for you, now you can do something nice for me, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It can get really murky really quick because, I consider myself to be like a nice person, but then a lot of times I'm like, wait, but what is your goal here? Or like, what are you hoping to get out of this?
Yeah.
So it is a constant like self-assessment, self-awareness, and like asking the Lord to open my eyes to those places where I am like blinded to my own sin. Right.
Well.
But yeah, I don't think that really answers your question.
Well, no, I think it's fair to say you acknowledge that there are just good people, Christian or not. And for you, it comes down to your motivation for what you do. And your motivation is shaped by your faith. You are not doing it for any ulterior motive. You're not saying others are. But for you, you are not doing it for an ulterior motive. I'm gonna be kind to this person and treat them with compassion solely because I'm supposed to be kind and compassionate. Right? That's it. I think that's totally fair.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of a hard question. Like, why is anybody nice and kind to other people? For the most part, probably because they just are nice, kind people, right? Let me ask this, because I think one of the things that you have done a good job of, and every time I've talked to you, this has come through. You are not tied up, or I guess your self-worth is not tied up in your job. And for me, that was a problem when I was a pastor. There was a whole lot of like, but if I'm not a pastor, who am I? And my ability to preach a good sermon or to be the one that people call on when something like, I had so much of my own self-worth tied into that. And if I wasn't doing that well, I was a bad human. I've never seen you have those struggles. And maybe you have. Yeah. Maybe you just cover it really well. How have you managed to keep a healthy distinction between like where work Meagan ends and where personal Meagan begins?
Well, thank you. I will caveat and say that like that is generally true, but not always. I certainly, as particularly if I get like negative feedback, I can really let that get to me in a way that is not great. But generally, yes, I do have a pretty good, I referenced like the boundary piece earlier, right? Like that is very important to me. I think for me, part of it is because I have always worked with people that do very much find their identity in work. And so I would see things in them that I was like, this doesn't seem healthy, or like, this doesn't seem like it's actually fulfilling, or, however you want to look at it. And so seeing that in coworkers or, other people in my life that have kind of gone that route more so. It's always been important to me to be intentional to not fall into that. And I think, honestly, a big piece of it is like having other things that are important to me that I do outside of work. I kind of have always said, like, for me, my job is more of a means to an end. And like, I do enjoy my job and I want to show up and I want to do a good job.
Right.
but like I could change. I mean, my career is not, I'm not career driven at all. That's what I'm trying to say. So like, I'm not trying to get somewhere down the road.
Right.
I'm not trying to climb some corporate ladder. Like, that's not my goal at all. So I'm trying to like make money to live and also to do fun things.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, have a job that affords me some flexibility to like, you know, spend time with people that I care about and travel and, you know, leave work at work for the most part.
Right.
And so that's something that I mean, it takes balancing and it takes saying no, which is very hard.
Yeah.
But it is something that is important to me. And I think, you know, when you then find more of your identity in the things that you're doing besides work, then it means that work doesn't have to be that thing for you.
Yeah. I somewhat related, but I remember when I had about a month where I went through my own job transition, and I had a month where I was unemployed, and I didn't know what was next, right? And it was a very kind of nerve-wracking time. It was the first time I was out of full-time job. At first time I wasn't a pastor in my adult career. But I remember kind of sitting there and thinking like, okay, if I'm not doing work, if I'm not providing for my family, if I'm not like, what am I? Who am I? What am I worth? And I remember, and this was sort of a unique experience for me, and maybe others can relate, but like, because at that time I didn't have a job, I stayed home and watched my daughter. And she was, 2, I think, at the time. And I remember having a day where I thought, to her, I'm just dad. I'm not ex-pastor. I'm not, you know, doesn't have an income right now. Like, she didn't care about any of that. And not to say my identity as being a father, as much as it helped me remember, oh, my identity was never the job I had. My identity was never the title I was given. My identity is like who God has made me. And I'm living that out, whether I'm working or not, or whether my job is over there or over there.
Yeah.
And that was a huge kind of epiphany for me. You seem to have not needed an epiphany, or you kind of seem to be firmly planted in that. Is that fair?
I mean, some people would probably say I just don't care enough about my job, so I think you could argue it either way. But yeah, I mean, that feels right. Like, it's never been something that has defined who I am.
So then let me ask you this, because I think what you're describing, I think, sounds really healthy in some respects. I wonder if, when you look at your job, and I know you're leaving one job and transitioning into another, but you know, think about when you're in the midst of what you're currently doing. Did you see it as like, okay, my job is a means to an end. I really just go and do the best that I can because I know I'm an ambassador of Christ, but like, there's no greater purpose here? Or did you still think, look, I'm not defined by this, but I know God has still called me into this, and so I'm going to have a bigger purpose to it?
I mean, I would say some of both.
Yeah.
Like, but there's certainly, I felt called to what I was doing.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know, like that calling could have changed at any time, right? Sure. Like, my calling wasn't so much the specific job I was in, if that makes sense. It was more like showing up and doing a good job and caring for people.
Yeah.
But I mean, I very clearly like felt called to VCU when I first started there. Like, doors kind of opened for me in a way that made it very obvious that that was where I was supposed to be. Just like doors opened for me to now transition to something else, right?
Sure.
So I think like the Lord is very clear in that way for me. I know that's not everyone's experience. Yeah. But yeah, I think it does help on those days that like you just don't want to show up well, to be like, oh, actually, like, there is more at play here than just me showing up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a nuance there, because it's like I'm still called to do this and to do this well. I'm called to treat people well and to honor the work. But because I know my work doesn't define me, is not my identity. You're not like so tied to it that you're like, oh my gosh, if I didn't have this job, I don't know what I would do. You are able to be fully yourself, regardless of your circumstance, And that means when you go to work, you bring all of you with you. And when you go out with your friends to dinner, you bring all of you with you. Like you are just all of yourself in any given scenario.
I try to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an important nuance, because I think this conversation can be like, why are you called into this one specific? And you're like, well, because, God brought me into this one role. What happens when you leave that role? For some people, that's an identity crisis, or it's oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do. My whole life is spiraling. For you, it's no, I'm still me. My role may shift, my responsibilities may shift. I'm still the person God made me.
Yeah.
I think that is a really kind of unique posture to be at this stage. But it's nuanced enough that people might be like, oh, but what about, shouldn't you be more on mission with God? And your point is, I am. And my job is just one way to live it out.
One facet of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, like I said, I think some people would argue that like I probably, because listen, if I could be a stay-at-home cat mom, I'd be probably into it. Like I'd do it. Because I just don't.
How many cats?
Oh, just the one. Just the one.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's fine. Maybe two. That's it. That's my max. But yeah, like, I don't know. I love hobbies. I'm big into hobbies.
Sure.
So like, if I could just kind of like hang out, do some stuff every day, like not just lay around. Like I want to do stuff.
Yeah.
But anyways, I feel like some people would be like, well, you don't care about your career.
Which she lacks ambition. Or
which I don't think is true. But I just like, there's just other things that are important to me.
Yeah.
That if I had the opportunity to pursue and not have to worry about the money side of things, maybe I would do things differently. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's fair. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know I've like bored a hole deep into that one. But let me ask this, because you've talked about how you're transitioning to this new job that's completely remote.
Yes.
One of the ways that you feel you really lived out your faith in the workplace was your relationships with your coworkers and how you treated them with respect and all these sorts of things. How do you do that in a remote setting?
It's a great question. I'll get back to you in 4 to 6 months.
Yeah. Maybe you don't have experience yet, but I mean, you're thinking about the transition, like, how do you respect and treat with dignity people that you may never actually meet?
I mean, yeah, I think it is going to look different. And I don't know exactly what that will be. But I also, I don't know. I have to remind myself, like, I still have coworkers, right? it just looks a little different.
Right.
And, we all did this for a while, fully remote thing. Or most of us.
But at least in that scenario, most of us had previously established relationships.
Yes. But actually, I mean, it is funny. I feel like I became much closer with all of my coworkers during that time, which is interesting. It just was a different scenario. But anyways, we were talking a little bit yesterday about like, what is a coworker? Or like, how do you define that, right? Yeah. Like, is it... if I go and work at Gather every couple days, like, are the people that I'm working alongside there, are they my coworkers as well, even though they're doing a different job, right? Is it more the proximity piece, or is it doing the same role?
Right.
So it's kind of interesting it's interesting to think about. Like, I will certainly have coworkers that I'll interact with, although I don't actually know how much I'll be interacting with my coworkers as much as like, I don't want to say clients. They're not exactly clients, but like the people I'll be helping.
Auditing or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm not sure like what the how that will work.
Part of you at least is thinking about, I might create my own community, my own kind of at-work community.
Yes.
They may not work for the same company. They may not do anywhere close to the same job. But you're thinking about having an intentional approach to creating a working community. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I have some good friends that are pretty much fully remote as well. So even thinking about like, working alongside of them at certain opportunities, or, how can we make it more collaborative, but also just like, I don't know, community than just me sitting at my computer for 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday, right? It's not really my vibe. Yeah. I much prefer, some of it will be like Zoom meetings and actually talking to people just, beyond a screen. So there's that side too. But I think, yeah, like who is my coworker, and like how do I show up and serve people well?
Yeah.
In that, I don't know. I think it'll be an interesting balance to figure out.
Yeah. We've talked at Needle's Eye with some of the stuff that we do, the idea of like bloom where you're planted, right? The idea of like, okay, this is where God has you. And much like Paul talks about, he finds contentment no matter his circumstance, right? So, okay, look around. Where are you? Where has God planted you? And how can you blossom in this environment? And that's really sort of a difficult conversation when you're saying, well, my headquarters are in a completely different city. Like, I don't even live there. I don't have an office space. So I'm not really planted in a physical location. But the idea of like, but you know what? My physical environment is a whole bunch of other people who work remote too. And the blossoming or the blooming where I'm planted thing is, what if I create a community here? What if I have a positive impact here on these people rather than, you know, on those who the W-2 has the same organization at the top.
Yeah.
That's, I don't have that, but that's why I'm really curious what your thoughts are on it. How do you impact the culture of a company that you're not physically going to?
I mean, I think it still just is the same kind of thing, right? You respect other people, you show up and you do your job well. You know, if you see something wrong, you try to have the courage to speak up about it. Yeah, I mean, I think it is the same things as like if you're in person, it just maybe looks different.
Yeah. Or it probably requires a bit more intentionality.
Yes. Oh, for sure. Because I think it would be very easy to kind of like be disconnected, right? Like the connection piece will require some more, right? Whether that's being like, oh, can you stay on the Zoom meeting for a little bit? I'd love to just like get to know you better.
Yeah.
We've never met, right? And yeah, everybody's kind of all spread out. So it will be interesting to see how much interaction we have. Yeah.
I can't wait. I really want to check back in with you and like see.
Yeah. Part 2.
Yeah, like see how that's, because, you know, I think I won't speak for you or anybody else. I have a propensity to depersonalize people I haven't met, right? So if I'm emailing with somebody or if I'm talking even over the phone, but I've never met them, like they become a service provider, not a human being. Or they become an email signature, not a created in the image of God individual, right? Like, I don't do it on purpose.
Yeah.
But it's just sort of like, I can't put a face to this person. Like, I have a hard time visualizing who they are, and so they don't become a who to me.
Yeah.
And I imagine if you're working and it's like, oh man, this project didn't go according to plan, or they didn't meet their deadline, or if I know, oh, well, that's Sally, I saw her earlier this week and, you know, something's happening and I can understand.
Yeah.
That's completely different than like, okay, well, you know, John just didn't do his thing and I have no clue who he is, anything about his personal life, so eviscerating him over email is pretty easy.
No, I mean, it's true. I do think like with Zoom meetings that helps because you can at least see someone face to face. But yeah, I mean, email is very
dangerous.
impersonal. Yeah, like, and yeah, even the phone can be a pretty impersonal thing. So yeah, I think it goes back to the intentionality thing of like, oh yeah, I want to like meet people and I want to connect with people in my new role. So what does that look like? I don't quite know, but
fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got a lot of the work stuff, maybe still the uncertainty of what it would be like to work in a remote setting, but people are at the core of it regardless. How you will treat people no matter what. If you, and this might be a big question, so take your time with it, who has God formed Meagan to be? Like if you really sit back and you think, through my life, these are the ways God has reiterated who I am, or this is how God has formed me into the person I'm becoming. You know, what would you say are like, these are things that I can securely hold on to and say, yes, God has created me to be this person.
I mean, that is a big question.
I know, you know, and you don't, you know, feel free to go as scary deep as you want, or to stay like, well, You know what? I like cats. Whatever.
Okay. I mean, I do think the relationship piece is certainly a thread throughout. Like that is always something that's been very important to me, is just, having strong friendships, investing a lot into the people that I care about. And so, yeah, I think even now, like thinking about my current job, like I get told all the time, like, oh, you're so great with like our like research families, which that's very important to me, that I, treat them with kindness and make things as like easy as possible for them. So yeah, I think not, but obviously not only in work, but like just as a person, like, which maybe everyone would say that, but I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think everyone would say that that's like as important to them maybe as it is to me.
Yeah, I don't
It's
think so.
just and so, I mean, that is part of what I appreciate about my job and the flexibility that I have, is that it enables me to, invest time in friendships,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm not working 80 hours a week. It enables me to invest in community and, even just the flexibility to like show up for people when they really need something. That's very important to me. So I think, like, I would say that's probably one of the big things that defines who I am.
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, there are a lot of like other
Yeah.
things too, like smaller things
Right.
of like what I like to do or what I enjoy doing. There's a lot of things that I love doing.
Are there any like defining moments you can think back on and be like, X happened and I knew that was God revealing to me this thing about myself, or in any kind of moment that sticks out to you for that? It doesn't have to be. I mean, I don't think God works that way for everybody, or God can only work in that way. I always just wonder, was there kind of a moment where you said, okay, I know that was God speaking to me through this situation or whatever?
I mean, I certainly have moments where I know God is speaking to me, but maybe not in that specific way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. All right.
Yeah. No, nothing. I can't think of anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big question to put you on the spot.
A little bit, yeah.
But I
I'll
mean,
think on it.
It's
but
kind of fun. I like
yeah,
doing that.
There probably is something, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, okay. In that case, we'll kind of pop back a little bit to some of your like faith journey stuff, because I know you talked a lot about like you grew up in this Christian home, you went to this Christian school, you moved here, and you had this sometimes good, sometimes not so great church experience, and now you've landed back in a new one. How has the church, in particular, kind of in connection with your work, how has it really helped you understand like your purpose at work, or the way that your faith is actually supposed to be like, in tandem? Work is not just like something that exists, but really my Christianity is lived out at home. How has the church sort of equipped you, helped you to think about that, whatever, giving you a good lens?
Yeah, I think some of it does come back to the identity piece. Because I also think like if I'm really showing up well outside of work, it enables me to show up well at work.
Yeah.
So that is part of the reason that I like am so rigid about my boundaries sometimes, is like, no, I'm off today.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to be available, and that will equip me to show up for you better tomorrow when I'm back.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think like the identity piece, and yeah, I think for me, so much of what I've learned through church is just that like I am a whole person. So church being loosely church, small group, all the things, right?
Okay.
Like, but yes, I have learned that like I'm a whole person. So yeah, that makes it so that work doesn't have to be my defining thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think even just, I don't know, the church, for me, so much of what I've learned and grown like through my time in church has been, yeah, that identity part. Like,
Yeah.
this is who I am. This is who God made me to be. Like, this is how I can show up in the world as like the best version of myself. Not always, right? But like, I don't know. I think just being in community with other believers like helps you figure out some of that, or has helped me figure out some of that in ways that I didn't necessarily know on my own, or wouldn't have learned on my own, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you say it, and I think that it's just obvious about who you are as a person. The idea of like, I know I'm a whole person, right? I know that no matter what, I'm a whole person. If I have a god-awful day at work, yes, that was terrible, and I didn't enjoy it. But my life is still great. Like, I still have friendships. I still have purpose. I still, like, the fact that you can look at your life as this holistic thing, that God has given me all of this and made me into this person, and I have all these things that God is calling me into. It's just amazing how that can give you a security and a confidence that like a bad day at work or a setback or getting passed over for that promotion or whatever doesn't become the thing that suddenly ruins your self-image, your self-esteem, your ability to enjoy all the blessings God's given you, that kind of thing. And I think it sounds so simple. Like, it's almost like you reach a level of faith that looks like you're not trying, you know? It's like, oh, they're so secure in their relationship with the Lord that it almost looks like they're not trying anymore. And it feels a little bit like that's where you're at. Where like other people look at me and they say, she doesn't have any ambition, or she doesn't care enough. But for you, I think it's a lot more of, I just have this genuine comfort in the Lord that I go to work and I do my best and I try to fulfill the purpose He's given me. I also know at the end of the day that my life is more than my work, and God cares for me, even if I do bad today. God cares for me enough that my purpose follows me from one job or one role to the next.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I could have a really terrible day at work and then like go to small group and have a really great time at small group, right? And so it's like, it's that, I think a lot of it is just how you're investing your time. Because if I was working all the time, then my identity would be so much in my work, right? Because that's how I'm spending my time, right?
That makes
but
sense.
Because I am really conscientious to like work my time and then I'm off the clock, I'm not working, and I don't do that perfectly by any means. But yeah, it has really enabled me to like do things that I care about outside of work. Like this year I planted a garden in a community garden. It's like the highlight of, I loved it so much. Like, it was great. But like, I had to set aside time to do that, right? And now I'm like, oh, I love cultivating little plants. That's like something I'm good at. No, I'm not great at it. We had some issues, but it's fine. Like, anyway, I don't know, just things like that where I actually really enjoy like discovering more of the things that I enjoy, that I think God made me to enjoy.
Absolutely.
That's something I've kind of like been on a journey of in the last like couple of years, is like, I don't have to just do what everyone else seems to like or think is cool or whatever. Like, for me, it's about finding those things that I enjoy, which means you have to try some things and be like, that didn't work. I don't really like that, right? Anyways, I'm like big on the hobbies train right now, because I think it's very important for people to have activities or like things that bring them joy outside of just work, or even, you know, relationship or anything. Like, another person is not gonna fulfill all of the things either, whether that's relationship wise or friendship or whatever that means. But yeah, I think just finding those things that outside of everyone else, you can still really enjoy. I got us really off track there. But.
No. I think that actually makes a lot of sense, because I think what's unique about yours is when I've sat down here and I've talked with so many other people, it is so laser focused on the work portion. It's so laser focused on, okay, well, you know, how do you bring this to your job, and what sort of techniques, or, you know, how does God work through you in that setting? And you have that. You have that, but it's very much tied to people and your interaction, your relationship with people. But what I think is unique about yours, and I think is really interesting for people to hear and think about for themselves, you find so much fulfillment in what God has brought you to outside of your job.
Correct.
And by leaning into those things, it helps you be the full person you are. And that's what pours into your job. You are better at work because you are pouring into, you are actually caring for yourself when you're at home too.
Yeah.
And you know, I think it's great when people are super ambitious and they say, listen, my goal is to build this great big company or to reach this level of influence. Or I think that's awesome too, especially if that's truly who they are and God given. But if we only have those conversations, that's what it looks like to be faithful. What does it look like to be faithful in your job? Well, I'm super career driven, ambitious, and focused. Awesome. But that's not the only way to be faithful. You're faithful in that, listen, this is how God created me to find fulfillment. And the more fulfilled I am as a person, the better I can serve my job and the people that it brings me into contact with. And that is a different and unique perspective that is just as important. A lot of us, truthfully, like a lot of us, myself included, I don't do a lot of hobby things because it doesn't feel productive. And when I've tapped into those moments, I go, it's like a breath of fresh air. I'm rejuvenated. And hearing you talk makes me go, oh my gosh, no wonder those hobbies are a form of Sabbath. It's a form of saying, this isn't, I'm not laying on the couch. I'm engaging in something that is physically demanding or mentally demanding, but it's actually restful because God created me to find myself in these things.
Yes. And like, those things can be so life-giving that it doesn't have to be, I mean, I think we even talked about this briefly yesterday, but like with the travel piece, right? Like that's something that's very important to me. And that's something that is like physically demanding, but is so like rejuvenating to me. And sure, there are times that I like feel tired and need to rest, and I do that. But it's amazing how energized I feel doing any of those things, right, that I really enjoy doing. But yeah, I mean, I really appreciate the way you phrased that because it makes a lot of sense in my brain hearing you say it. But like sometimes I do feel bad that I don't care more or that I don't invest more or I'm not more driven at work. Like I feel like I should be because of culture and all the things. But yeah, I just, and again, I mean, like I said, it's not that I don't care. It's just that I don't care too much. I don't think, you know, I don't, I care about a lot of other things too. So.
No, and that is true to who you are. It is true to who God has made you to be. You will still love people and pour into relationship and bring your best self to your job. You will recognize that helping these research projects to have, you know, data integrity means whatever results they produce can be trusted. Like that's all really important. That's also not the part of you that you say, this is what God wants me to care most about myself. You actually have these other things where you go, really God fulfills me in these ways and builds me up in these ways. My job is part of it and my job enables it, but my job is not it. And that's a different perspective than I've had conversations with in the past and just as valid. I appreciate it. Okay, so all of that, right? I feel like we've kind of covered a whole gamut of conversation. I don't know if any one person could follow, so
I don't know.
I've enjoyed it. But let me ask you one more question, and this you can go anywhere you want.
Okay.
At this stage in your life, middle of a career transition for you, where do you find joy?
Well, I mean, I feel like I've kind of talked about
A little bit.
all these hobbies. I mean, listen, I could give you a list. Okay, so I love my garden so much, but it is kind of like done now because it's winter.
I was gonna say November's not a good time.
No, but I grew some vegetables, but mostly flowers because I was like, well, I mostly care about flowers. Like that's what I. And then I did a painting class at the Visual Arts Center that was making a flower arrangement and then painting a flower arrangement. And that was the best thing. It was so fun. It was great. And I was not good at it. Like by like anyone's standards, I was not good at it. But I didn't care because I loved it. And it was so much fun. So yeah, I think I am like, I love any sort of like craft crafty thing. And I used to not do those things because I thought I wasn't good at them, which again, to be clear, I'm not like an artiste, right?
Sure.
Like I'm not, but
the quality of the end product is not the point.
correct. And that has like given me a lot of freedom to be like, well, it doesn't matter. Like I like paint a lot at home. I love doing that. I'm like already planning my garden for next year. I'm very excited because I have like a 4x4 plot. So you gotta like kind of plan ahead, which I did not do this year. I just kind of like threw some seeds in the ground. And
I understand 4x4, but like, is that a big plot? Is
no,
it a
that's
small
like
plot?
half this table.
Okay, so it takes planning because you have such a small amount of real estate
Correct.
to work. Okay.
Yeah, I got to figure out like how to take advantage of it. And then I love like cooking. I love eating out too. So
Food.
good
Just food.
restaurants, all the best food. Yeah, good cocktails. I really enjoy my small group a lot.
Yeah.
Like we have a lot of fun together and just I don't know. We're starting Advent early this year because we do Advent every year.
That's cool.
But anyway, so I'm like excited about that. Like it's almost Christmas. I love Christmas. Anyway,
almost everything you have said involves like people.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe gardening and maybe painting don't, but even the way you got into them was like, I took this class with other people and it is just amazing to see how you are clearly this relational powerhouse. And that's awesome.
Important. Yeah, it's important to me.
Good.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, thank you. Seriously, Meagan, this has been truly, this has been a unique, but actually like surprisingly challenging conversation on like, okay, I know who I am at work. How am I taking care of like my whole self? So you've just helped me a lot with that. Thank you.
Great. Good.
Sweet.
Thanks. It's
All right,
been
we'll
good to be
check back
here.
soon.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks for tuning in to the Needle's Eye Faith and Work show. Please share, like, and subscribe if you enjoyed this episode and want to see more. Needle's Eye is a faith and work community based in Richmond, Virginia. We are a nonprofit organization that seeks to help working people grow in Christ, find purpose, and transform the marketplace. Check out Needle's Eye online at www.needleseye.org. Here, you can find more content, check out upcoming in-person events, and learn more about partnering with us financially.